kind of conquering awful times, and that there is hope in the darkest of situations. And I guess that was the starting point, really.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I never really looked at it as a story about darkness or hope necessarily. Like, hope is in there, but I look at it as a woman's...
This is Starscope, and tonight we are diving into a story that has already shaken Hollywood and left both fans and insiders reeling. Because what began as whispers behind the scenes has now exploded into full-scale legal warfare, and for the very first time, the name of Justin Baldoni is being dragged into accusations that no one saw coming. A shocking claim, made by none other than Isabela Ferrer's lawyer, who has publicly declared that Baldoni engaged in harassment toward the young actress. And what makes this revelation even more explosive is the fact that this is not some anonymous social media rumor. This is a formal legal statement placed directly into the spotlight, where every word will now be dissected, questioned, and broadcast across the entertainment world, and already the reaction is
so clear to me from the get-go that this is mine just as much as it is yours.
We need to talk to some people. We both talk with our hands a lot.
Yes.
And like move our mouth the same, and have the same...
Now suddenly being accused of behavior that directly contradicts everything he has built his brand around. And at the center of this storm is a rising actress, Isabela Ferrer, who until now has been largely unknown to the mainstream, but whose name is suddenly at the forefront of headlines everywhere. And the very idea that she and her team would step into this kind of public firestorm tells you one thing loud and clear: they are not backing down. Language coming from Ferrer's lawyer is sharp, intentional, and designed to set the stage for a case that could quickly escalate beyond gossip and speculation into something that feels like a direct courtroom clash. Because according to insiders, the claim of harassment is not being made casually. It is backed by accounts, incidents, and alleged evidence that Ferrer's camp believes will hold up under scrutiny. And already this is Hollywood buzzing, because the dynamics at play here are unprecedented. Justin Baldoni is not just another actor, he's a figure with a powerful network connections that span across film, television, and even publishing, and his recent ventures have positioned him as one of the few Hollywood figures who openly advocates for progressive masculinity and redefined narratives. So when someone of that stature is accused of harassment toward a young actress, the contradiction alone creates a media frenzy, and the stakes immediately skyrocket. But here's where it gets even wilder, because this case does not exist in a vacuum. It connects directly to ongoing battles already swirling around Baldoni in the wake of his legal war with Blake Lively, a case that has dominated headlines and painted him alternately as a victim and as a fighter willing to push back against powerful Hollywood machinery. Now with Ferrer's name being added into the mix, people are starting to ask questions. Is this simply another opportunistic pile-on, or is it part of a broader pattern that reveals cracks in Baldoni's carefully managed image? And more importantly, what does this mean for the power dynamics that have already been strained by the Lively lawsuits? Because Hollywood has long thrived on perception, reputation, and alliances, and when one person's name becomes attached to controversy after controversy, it shifts the balance in ways that no amount of PR spin can fully repair. What we know so far is that Ferrer's lawyer has gone public, intentionally choosing words that suggest not only that Baldoni behaved inappropriately, but that his actions created a sense of coercion, a dynamic that they are directly describing as harassment. And while the exact details of those interactions have not yet been fully disclosed, the decision to make these claims publicly rather than quietly behind closed doors signals a deliberate strategy. Ferrer's camp wants this out in the open. They want accountability. They want to strip away the protective veil that often shields Hollywood elites from scrutiny, and that decision alone raises the stakes to unprecedented levels, because once a claim like this is in the public sphere, it takes on a life of its own already. You can see the ripple effect across social media, where fans are split into two camps: those who believe Ferrer's lawyer without hesitation, pointing to broader patterns in Hollywood where young actresses have historically been silenced when speaking out against established male figures, and those who defend Baldoni, adamantly arguing that the timing is suspicious, that these claims are an orchestrated attack meant to destabilize his ongoing fight against Blake Lively, and that Ferrer herself might be caught in a much larger power struggle between Hollywood giants and YouTube creators who have already been entangled in soapia drama, smear campaigns, and backdoor alliances. This is where things become complicated, because regardless of whether you believe Ferrer's lawyer or Baldoni himself, the reality is that this case is not unfolding in isolation. It is layered with the shadows of other lawsuits, whispers of NDA, stories of private meetings gone wrong, and a sense that Hollywood is once again being forced to confront its own culture of power, imbalance, control, and silence, and unlike scandals of the past, this one is being dissected in real time across YouTube, Twitter, podcasts, and independent media, where creators with millions of followers are analyzing every detail, amplifying every document, and reshaping public opinion faster than any traditional outlet could ever manage. Think about it for a moment. We are watching the collision of narratives play out in real time. On one side, Baldoni, the Hollywood insider turned advocate who positioned himself as a reformer, now facing accusations that undermine that very identity. On the other side, Ferrer, a young actress stepping into the spotlight under the protection of a sharp legal team determined to make her voice heard, and surrounding them the ever-expanding ecosystem of creators, commentators, and fans who are refusing to let this story be controlled by the usual PR machines. Instead, they are pulling apart every filing, every leaked message, every whispered account, and placing it directly in front of audiences who are more skeptical and more informed than ever before. And here's the kicker: the lawyer representing Ferrer has already indicated that there is more to come, that what has been shared publicly is only the beginning, and that in the coming weeks documents, testimonies, and evidence will be made available that could fundamentally shift the perception of Baldoni, not just in this case, but across the broader cultural conversation. And that promise of new revelations has fueled an almost obsessive level of anticipation, because everyone now wants to know exactly what Baldoni is being accused of, how serious the allegations really are, and whether this will finally mark the moment where Hollywood is forced to reckon with the disconnect between public image and private reality. And the most chilling part of all is that the lawyer's wording includes one detail that cannot be ignored. They described Ferrer's situation as being like a hostage, not in the literal sense, but in the psychological sense, implying that Baldoni's influence and actions created a dynamic of fear, pressure, and coercion that left Ferrer feeling trapped and powerless. And if that framing is expanded upon in future filings, it could become the most damaging element of this case, because words like harassment and coercion carry weight, but words like hostage ignite emotions, outrage, and solidarity that spread like wildfire across audiences who are already primed to react to Hollywood scandals. This is where Scope steps in, because our role is not just to tell you what happened, but to walk you through the layers behind the headlines, to show you the mechanics of how these battles unfold, why certain narratives are pushed, who benefits from silence and who benefits from speaking out. And as we peel back those layers, it becomes clear that this case is not simply about one actress and one actor. It is about the future of accountability in an industry that has long thrived on unchecked power and silence. The story now takes an even more disturbing turn, as whispers inside the entertainment industry suggest that Isabela Ferrer's legal team isn't just throwing accusations in the dark. They claim to have documentation, emails, text messages, and possible testimony from people close to the set of recent projects that allegedly showed Justin Baldoni engaged in inappropriate conduct that blurred the lines between professional mentorship and personal intrusion. Sources connected to the case describe Justin as someone who carefully builds a public image of a respectful family man and inspirational figure, but behind the scenes allegedly pressures young rising actresses in ways that are manipulative and uncomfortable. According to the lawyer representing Ferrer, this was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a repeated pattern of behavior that created an atmosphere where Isabela felt cornered and unable to speak out without risking her career. Now imagine that for a moment. Hollywood is a place where speaking against someone with power can mean doors shut forever, projects disappear overnight, and reputations are painted over by high-priced PR teams. The lawyer argues that Isabela Ferrer is taking a monumental risk by daring to bring this out and to be open, and if her claims stand true, this could unravel Justin Baldoni's reputation in ways even his strongest connections cannot contain. Observers note how carefully worded the filings are, designed not to sound like exaggerations, but like cold step-by-step accounts. Each instance carefully described, each action connected to witnesses or digital proof, and in a city where evidence often vanishes, these details raise questions about whether Justin underestimated the paper trail his actions left behind. But here's where the wild twist deepens, because reports indicate that Baldoni's camp has already started building a counterattack. Their narrative is that Isabela Ferrer is being manipulated by larger forces, possibly rival studios, rival production partners, or even individuals tied to the wider legal chaos. Surrounding Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, Baldoni's team argues that he is being dragged into this storm not because of wrongdoing, but because of his increasing influence in Hollywood as a producer-director and now central figure in the ongoing court dramas connected to Lively. These are massive claims, because if both sides push their stories forward, what we could see is a courtroom face-off that pulls in not only Isabela and Justin, but also exposes how young actors are treated on sets, how power is exercised, and how public images are weaponized. Against the vulnerable industry insiders already whisper that this case is not just about harassment, it's about control, influence, and silencing voices before they grow too loud. The lawyer for Ferrer in an early statement hinted that Isabela had felt trapped on multiple occasions when Baldoni allegedly extended professional guidance into spaces that became personal without her consent. The words used were chilling phrases like emotional hostage, career intimidation, and subtle threats were mentioned, and if those are repeated in official filings, the reaction from Hollywood will be explosive, because no matter how much charisma Justin Baldoni displays on screen, if he's painted as someone who preyed on younger talent, the backlash will be unforgiving. Fans of his work are already split, some still defending him strongly, pointing to his years of advocacy for positivity, others growing concerned that there may be a darker reality behind the curtain. What makes this even more complex is the timing. The lawsuit wave against Blake Lively is still hot, and some legal strategists suggest this could intersect if evidence shows communications between Baldoni's legal adversaries and Isabela Ferrer's team. Imagine that a scenario where different cases suddenly overlap into a mega legal saga with multiple stars on the defensive, and with Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, and other outspoken figures already inserting themselves into the Blake Lively chaos. The potential for public spectacle here is off the charts. Industry veterans say that if Baldoni fights back too hard without addressing the substance, he risks looking like a bully, but if he admits too much, he risks destroying his career completely. Meanwhile, Isabela Ferrer's lawyer continues to leak hints at more disturbing revelations, suggesting that text exchanges may include words or demands that show clear overstepping. If those come out, it won't just be gossip, it will be evidence, and evidence in Hollywood lawsuits is what transforms careers into headlines, and headlines into disasters. Now the wildest part is this: as Ferrer's lawyer pushes harder, they're not only accusing Baldoni of harassment, but also suggesting that there were enablers, people around him, who saw what was happening and did nothing. Maybe even agents, assistants, or producers who chose to stay silent because of who Baldoni is. If names of those enablers surface, it won't just be a case against one man, it will be a case exposing an entire network of silence, and that is what makes this story so dangerous for Hollywood, because once the dominoes start falling, no one knows where it stops. And as if things weren't already tense, the room shook again with new revelations, because this wasn't just about whispered claims anymore. This was now about sworn affidavits, email screenshots, and detailed accounts that began to paint a disturbing picture of a man who had carefully constructed an image of being a family-first Hollywood heartthrob while allegedly operating in ways that went completely against that carefully crafted brand. And when Isabela Ferrer's lawyer pulled out what they described as the turning point evidence, the energy shifted entirely. The jury leaned forward, the reporters stopped typing mid-sentence, and even Baldoni himself looked rattled for the first time. It was a set of emails supposedly exchanged between Baldoni and one of Ferrer's representatives, emails that contained language which to the legal team suggested coercion, manipulation, and what they called psychological entrapment, because while there wasn't a clear statement of physical harm, what these messages revealed was a pattern of subtle intimidation, the kind that made it nearly impossible for a young rising actress to feel like she could walk away freely without fear of her career being dismantled. And that was the bombshell the lawyer wanted the public to see, because this wasn't a case about tabloid rumors anymore. This was a case about control, power imbalance, and exploitation hidden beneath the shine of Hollywood success. And the longer the details rolled out, the more people started to realize this could be bigger than one case, bigger than one actress versus one powerful director, because if true, it meant the very system that enabled Baldoni also allowed countless other voices to be silenced under the same tactics. And let's be honest, the whispers in Hollywood had been there for years, the stories of actresses being cornered into roles, threatened with blacklisting if they didn't comply, or being pressured to stay quiet for the sake of their careers. And now with Ferrer's legal team pushing this narrative hard, it looked like Baldoni was standing at the edge of a cliff. staring at a fall that could take down not just his reputation, but potentially ripple through the entire industry. The lawyer even highlighted a shocking moment that allegedly happened during the production of an independent film where Ferrer said she felt she had no choice but to attend private late-night meetings with Baldoni in hotel suites. Meetings she described as suffocating, suffused with what she called a manipulative kind of hostage. Like control, not with physical locks or restraints, but with the invisible chains of career pressure and promises of breakthrough roles if she stayed compliant and threats of irrelevance if she didn't. And this is where the courtroom gasped, because hearing those words, hostage-like, under oath delivered with calm precision from her attorney, shook the narrative entirely. Baldoni's defense immediately objected, claiming this was an overdramatization meant to smear their client, but the judge allowed the phrasing to stand given. The context and the impact of that choice of words became the headline within minutes because it painted Baldoni not as a charming, misunderstood Hollywood figure, but as someone accused of constructing psychological cages for those under his professional reach. And while Ferrer herself has yet to speak fully publicly, she was reportedly shaken as these details were laid out. Her lawyer making it clear that their side is prepared to go to the end with this, that this is not a quick settlement kind of lawsuit. This is about accountability, visibility, and giving a voice to young women in Hollywood who often feel they have none. The public started debating fiercely, some claiming the entire thing is exaggerated, pointing out Baldoni's philanthropic work, his reputation for advocacy, and suggesting maybe this is a targeted takedown orchestrated by rivals or opportunists, while others insisted this fits into a bigger puzzle of Hollywood figures who preach empowerment publicly while operating under very different standards privately. And let's be honest, scandals like these never stay contained, and by the time the courtroom adjourned that day, hashtags like hashtag justice for Isabela and hashtag Baldoni exposed were already trending on social media platforms, with fans and critics battling over every detail, every leaked screenshot, every claim from either side, and the impact was immediate. Casting directors reportedly started to second-guess collaboration, studios became hesitant, investors quietly pulled back from projects linked to Baldoni, and suddenly his once uncheckable brand looked like it was balancing on a knife edge. And here's the kicker. Ferrer's lawyer hinted there may be even more to come, stating in a cryptic comment that the evidence reveal. And now the legal machine roared louder than ever, because whispers of this confrontation were not whispers anymore. They were being drafted into statements, filings, and requests that could carry weight inside a courtroom. And the narrative of Justin Baldoni as the gentle face of Hollywood was shifting into something darker, something nobody thought they would ever hear attached to his name. And while his fans rushed to defend him, online others cannot ignore the way Isabela Ferrer's team was carefully framing the language, using terms that lawyers never throw around lightly, terms like harassment, terms like coercion, terms like emotional pressure, that when written on official letterhead suddenly take on an entirely new gravity. And as these words began making their way into the public sphere, the question was no longer whether something happened, but whether this would spiral into the kind of full-scale case that drags reputations through the mud and leaves scars that no career can ever fully recover from. And through all of this, Justin remained silent. Not a single social media post, not a single denial, not even the carefully polished press statement that actors usually deploy in damage control scenarios. His silence became its own headline, his absence its own story, fueling speculation that maybe he was waiting, maybe he was cornered, or maybe he knew something even bigger was about to surface. And that's when a shift came from the Ferrer side, because they were no longer just pushing back, they were preparing to escalate, to subpoena records, to bring in outside witnesses to present what they claimed was corroborating evidence of interactions that never should have taken place behind closed doors. This wasn't a small PR battle anymore. This was the opening act of something that could redefine both of their careers and Hollywood itself. And while the mainstream media began cautiously circling the story, creators and independent voices online pounced on it, breaking down every piece of the filings, pointing out the tiniest changes in wording, speculating about what was being held back for maximum impact. And suddenly it felt like everyone was talking about Justin, not for his directing, not for his acting, not for his inspirational talks, but for allegations that painted him in a light completely foreign to the image he had built over years. And while this storm gathered force, the question hanging in the air was undeniable: if Ferrer's team really had the receipts, if they were willing to risk everything by putting this forward, then what would that mean, not just for Baldoni's career, but for every studio, every co-star, every sponsor tied to him, and more importantly, what would it mean for Hollywood's ongoing battle between image and truth? Because once you pull back the curtain, you can never put it back in place, and so we arrive at the edge of the cliff, where every unanswered question now feels heavier than the last. Because what began as murmurs behind industry doors has escalated into a storm, with official filings, lawyers circling the battlefield, and narratives spinning so fast the truth feels like a moving target. Justin Baldoni, once the polished symbol of Hollywood warmth, now stands in the center of a firestorm he cannot control, while Isabela Ferrer, a rising star who never asked for the spotlight, suddenly carries the weight of an entire conversation about power dynamics, safety, and survival. Inside an industry that has always preferred silence over confrontation, and here's the chilling part, the silence itself has become the loudest sound. Justin's refusal to speak fuels suspicion, Ferrer's refusal to back down fuels courage, and the legal team's refusal to mince words fuels a kind of reckoning that may not be stoppable anymore, because this is no longer just about two names on a headline. It is about a system that has for decades chosen reputation over truth, appearances over accountability, and in that system, one case can ignite a chain reaction that no PR team, no studio, no streaming giant can put out. So what happens next? Does Baldoni finally break the silence? Does Ferrer's team push forward with evidence that shatters his carefully built image? Does Hollywood protect him, or does Hollywood finally fracture under the weight of its own contradictions? And the most haunting question of all, will this be remembered as just another scandal that fades into whispers, or will it stand as the moment everything changed for good, the moment where an actress dared to speak and a system was forced to listen? Because make no mistake, this is not over, it is only the beginning, and the next move could decide the fate of more than just two careers. It could decide the future of how truth survives in Hollywood.